Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today it's all about the Orton effect, how to add glow to your photos. Now we'll go through a few methods for starting from very simple to a bit more complex and maybe of better quality. And we will, for the first time in this channel, use the Composite module, and that will hit our GPU really hard, you'll see. Anyway, let's do this together. I'm Nicholas. Off we go. Okay, then let's start. I have a set of four images. These two are raw files, and these two are images that I have developed in Darktable, and then I pass them on to Luminar Neo to add an Orton effect because there is a module in Neo that does that. There's also one called Mystical, which used kind of sparingly gives an extra bit of oomph. And I also had to dehaze a little bit on this mushroom scene. This one's a DNG because it's stacked from a number of raw files. And this image here, this NEF, is one I took from a sample of free raw images, and you can also download that. I'll put the link in the show notes, and you'll be able to work on that yourselves. So if you want to look at what the Orton effect does, or something similar, you see before and after, it adds kind of a glowy effect to the image. It works well on autumn photos, landscapes. Here's the second one with the Orton effect applied. So that's what we're going to try and replicate in Darktable. Now let's get into the editing then. So I'm going to open this first DNG file and duplicate it. Now normally I should be able to write here a version history and keep that in the metadata, but unfortunately it doesn't seem to work. It doesn't seem to remember them if I leave and come back. I'll try it again. Anyway, so what I think I'll do is take a preset of the watermark here and we'll write soften module. There, we'll be able to keep track of that. So there is a module called soften, which in the documentation does exactly the Orton effect. So we can kind of increase or decrease the size of the glow, the blurriness, and the saturation. Keep that 100%, and the brightness. Normally, in the idea of the Orton, it does brighten, it saturates, and it makes a glow. Now, I don't want too much brightness because I'm losing the colours here a little bit, and the mix between the two, which gives me kind of the opacity of the general look. So there we are. That's one quick and easy way to do it. Now, if we can check, that's the original, that's the soften, and that's the Orton effect. And the first thing you can see is that the whole lot has gone blurry, which I'm not saying it's not the real Orton effect, um, but I like the idea of kind of having a glow without losing too much sharpness. You see, so there is a kind of big difference between the two. Well, that is some kind of easy glow and fast. Um, it's a fast module to use. So let's go back to the original file and duplicate this. Notice as we go along that I've lost these versions here. So I'm going to carry on watermarking these, and this one will be called the blur module. Now, I looked online at some tutorials on Photoshop how to do this Orton effect, and the idea is you duplicate the layer and put it in screen mode to brighten everything, and then you add a blur layer, and the blur layer is put in multiply mode on top. So I thought, okay, let's multiply. So let's add a blur, a Gaussian blur. Oh, well, if you look at the tutorials, they say, kind of put a blur between 15 and 20 or whatever. Okay, so 20, that's a bit blurry. And now I'm going to add a mask. Now the mask is completely yellow. It's masking the whole of the screen. And I'm going to put this into multiply mode. And thankfully we have a fulcrum here, and the fulcrum will determine how I'm going to multiply the numbers so that I can adjust the global levels of the photo. Now, what I could do now, what I should do, is now go back to sigmoid and maybe reduce the contrast a little bit because it's adding a lot of contrast. And maybe, well, I don't want to skew the other way because I'm losing all the nice highlights here. Maybe something like that. And what I noticed, I find this actually quite nice. Um, Out of the three, it is the one I prefer because it does give, that's the blur, a lot of pop to the colours, which the Orton effect in Neo didn't really do. But you know what it's like in commercial software. Well, Neo, maybe particularly, you can really pile on the colours. Blur module, not so bad, and the soften module, and that's the original one. And what I noticed though is I'm losing quite a lot of detail and blowing out the highlights here, which is going to be the typical problem I've got with this method here. Now, I tried putting the blur module on top of sigmoid. Just seems to make things worse. It would be logical in one way to work in display mode, but there's another logic that says, well, if it's underneath sigmoid, then sigmoid is controlling the output of the whites and the blacks. So I think it is more logical for, well, I think it's better for me to put it under sigmoid for there. So I'm going to show you a last method, which is a bit more advanced, and that will enable us to keep these highlights here. Now, before doing any Orton effect with the composite module, let's concentrate on this composite module and try and understand how it works. Now, I have here an image. It's got nothing to do with the composite. I have I extensively developed it. I'm actually going to remove some of the diffuse and sharpen modules here because they do take a lot of computer power. So I'm going to lose a bit of the sharpness there, but never mind. I'm going to duplicate this. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to this one and I'm going to do some modifications. Now, maybe one modification I'm going to do is I'm going to do some very visible modification. I'm going to take the hue and I'm going to get this flower here and I am going to turn it. Oh, yes, bright red. There we are. Dirty modification. No, I can't leave that. I'm sorry. I need to. I'm sorry. There we are. Just not the ground. That was terrible. Okay, so that was a dirty one. And what do I want to do? I want to add a blur, maybe. So blur, and we'll put a lens blur, and we will blur the complete image by a lot. Now let's look. I'm going to compress the history here. Let's go to compress history stack on the left. And now if you have a look at the pipeline, so we're going up the pipeline in order. So demosaicing, denoising, lens, exposure. Now the first one that happens is the blur and then the color equalizer. Now just to separate them out, I'm going to move color equalizer up. No, I'm not going to move it above RGB. It's the blur, sorry, I want to move. I'm going to move the blur to, just under film it. There we are. That doesn't really change the look of the image. So we have tone equalizer on top of exposure before crop. This is important. No, sorry, it's color equalizer before the color RGBs. Okay. Now, normally, when I do composite, here, the composite module, if I click here, what I thought was that I would put this image here and I would see this image because I'm getting a composite with 100% opacity. Ah, dear, I did read the documentation, but you know, it's like when you read documentation and then you just don't read it and you're not careful of what you're doing. Well, this is exactly it. The composite module, it's written in the documentation, will only take into account where you've reached in the pipeline. So anything in the composite which is different to this, if it's underneath the modules that you've added on top won't have any effect. So the first thing I did was I added a color equalizer here. If I move the composite just underneath color RGB, I am before. I'll show you color equalizer. Here's color equalizer that's doing nothing. See, reset, it's doing nothing to this image. But if I move it above, then, hey presto, it's working. This is where composite is actually processing two images at the same time. So it's actually taking into account the composite, and it shouldn't do the blur, because the blur I put it on top. Oh, I know. That's the thing. Just learned something. If I add the blur, it's not on the composite image, of course. It's where you are in the actual image. There we are. And if I move color equalizer above, it goes back to the other color. And if I move blur below, it will blur, but not change the color. And if I move a color equalizer below composite, it will do both. There you are. And see, before doing this tutorial, I was thinking it was in the second edited module. No, it's in this photo, the one you're editing. Everything you've done will only work if your composite is above those modules in the image you are actually processing. Okay, that's important for our Orton effect. Let's go back to the Orton. Right, back to the mushroom. So we'll duplicate this. We can go in. We're going to duplicate this, and we'll put a little watermark in, maybe just version, and here we'll write composite. No, we're going to write this. We're going to write auxiliary. Auxiliary, we'll write it slow, small. We'll put this top left. So this is the auxiliary photo. So we know it is here in the list, this one being the TIFF file. So we need to be able to find this one. So what we're going to do now is we're going to use the blur module. So we're just going to blur this, and if I can find Gaussian blur, there we are, and blur it. Now I'm not going to put any blending mode on the mask here, because this will be in the composite. I can also, in color RGB, the idea is to kind of make it a little bit brighter. There we are. This is simulating the screen mode. Now I have kind of a bit of control over this if I use shadows, midtones, and bright light and highlights. I can also saturate just a little bit if I need to. Now you can always come back into this. This is kind of live filters in Photoshop. If you change the composite file, then the actual file you're working on will update in real time, real time, when the calculations are made. So now what we need to do is go to the first one. We need to go to composite here, and we need to pick the one we've just done. This is the one we've written aux. Normally when I do it, I've only got two images, now I've got a whole row of four here. So that is the one I want to see done. There's something a bit strange going on here. And what I want to do, maybe it's the DNG, that's strange. I hadn't tried with the DNG before. I'm actually going to go with sigmoid for the output profile, and that'll be fine. I think there's some problem with it's not demosaic, well, yeah, one would be demosaicing and not the other maybe. So this is before and after. And this, I can either leave it like that, but if I leave it like that, then what's the point? Because it's just the blurred. This is just the actual auxiliary file. What would be interesting would be to put this in a kind of blend mode there and reduce the opacity. This is the secret of it. Yes, I could have done that um, in the other examples too, but I actually find that using this method, you see, gives you a nice Orton effect. And I'm now going to put this one with a watermark version. I'm going to write Composite. And we'll compare them all. Right. So, wait for that to update. That's the Composite. It's still working. It's not sharp. But notice how I have lost less details in the highlights. That's the soften module. This is the blur module. So not very different, but I have more control in the highlights, especially if you want to work underneath. I don't know if I showed you that. But here I have more effect if I skew a little bit. I kind of have more control. I'll show you in another image afterwards. You do get more control. You need to try this. Soften module, blur module. That's the auxiliary file I didn't want, and that's the Orton effect. Um, well, there we are. You see, those are for the first ones. I'm going to show you the same thing very quickly again with the other set of images that we have. And I will say that I'm using sigmoid here, but I have been using, and you know that, the new candidates, which is not yet in the, well, it hasn't yet been accepted as a future module, but apparently we're very close to that. The AGX gives you a lot more control using the composite file there. So I'm going to do just the two. I'm not going to use soften because I really don't like it. And I'm going to do the blur and the composite. And this will go very quickly. So on this file, I'm going to duplicate that, add a watermark, now version, and we'll put blur module. There we are. Blur module, sorry, where is it? Here. We'll go to, I'm going to do this quite quickly, Gaussian blur, about 15 to 20, and then we'll add a mask and put it in multiply mode with a fulcrum, get the details back. Well, I need some highlights there. And if I can leave it too dark and reduce the opacity and get something that's actually, I'm sure a lot of you would be quite pleased to have this already made. I mean, it's quite good as an alternate effect. Now I'm going to duplicate this, and I am going to use this one as an auxiliary file. I'm going to remove the watermark and the blur. Actually, it's not the one I wanted to get rid of. It's this one, the original one I want to duplicate, sorry. This one, I don't need the watermark. I'm going to blur this with Gaussian blur, 20. And what I can do on this is I can, if I want to be kind of fair, I could blend this in screen mode. You see, if you want to mix two modes. Okay, get a bit of blur, maybe a little bit too much, but it doesn't matter. Screen, so I get it a little bit brighter. And this means that by using screen there in the composite, using another blend mode, it's the only way I've found to actually two blend modes working. And here in color RGB, I will add some saturation maybe. So that is brighter and a little bit blurry. And now let's go back in here. Composite is the last one, the third one. Put that in. And I'm going to put it straight away above sigmoid. I'm not going to wait for it to compute. And this one I will put in multiply mode. So empty mask, multiply mode, get the fulcrum, and reduce the opacity. There we are. And maybe if I want to get some highlights back, maybe push the skew down a little bit and play with the contrast. And this one I will watermark composite module. So there we are. Now we'll be able to compare all three. Now I just made the original Tiff and Neo reappear by magic. This one I'm going to get rid of for the moment by removing the label. There we are. I'm selecting just by pinks. So this is, we need to wait for it to load a bit. Composite module, blur module. You see there is a difference. I'm actually controlling the details better with the composite, and I'm also controlling the highlights better. Look here, how these highlights are blown, and here they're not. That's what I was talking about at the beginning. I'm much better on the highlights using the composite module, even if the number of calculations is horrendously more. This is the original Orton effect, which looks a bit wishy-washy now, to be honest. Obviously, it's quite toned down in this. You can boost it up. It seems to be a little bit stronger here. And there we are. I think the best thing you see is for you to try by yourselves. This video actually was one I wanted to make really to show you use of the composite module because I had never used it before. And I'm sure you have plenty other methods to get a beautiful glow. So please share them in the comments below. I'm here to learn just as much as you are. Anyway, with that done, I will wish you a good day and see you later. Ta-ra.